I didn't expect anyone to notice me that day. I was just a black woman sitting on a cold park bench, crying over a heartbreak I thought would never end. Then, out of nowhere, he appeared, a billionaire, and simply said, "I've been waiting." That moment changed everything. Before I tell you my story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because you won't want to miss this unbelievable journey of love, heartbreak, and unexpected second chances. I remember sitting there on that cold wooden park bench, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on me. The morning was quiet, but not completely silent. The faint hum of the city in the distance, the occasional rumble of a passing bus, and the chatter of people walking their dogs. Leaves rustled gently above me, but even the soft whisper of the wind couldn't calm the storm inside my chest. I wrapped my arms around myself, hoping the hug might hold some of the pieces together, though I knew it was hopeless. The park stretched out before me, empty enough to feel lonely, but just populated enough that I couldn't disappear entirely. Joggers ran past, earbuds in, completely lost in their own worlds. Parents walked hand in hand with their children, laughing, and I wondered how they could be so light when my heart felt so heavy. I tried not to notice them, but my eyes kept flicking up, catching fragments of smiles I didn't feel I deserved. The benches around me were worn, splintered in places, as if they had soaked up countless stories, heartbreaks, and secrets just like mine. I wanted to believe that maybe, if I sat quietly long enough, someone or something might notice me. I felt tears burning behind my eyes, and I tried to blink them away, but they slipped anyway. I didn't care that my cheeks were wet, that my mascara might streak or my hands tremble. My heart was a storm, and my body was trembling along with it. I wrapped my fingers tighter around my knees, trying to ground myself, but the ache wouldn't go away. I asked myself over and over, why does heartbreak feel so heavy? Why does it make me feel invisible, like I'm nothing but air that passes through the world unnoticed? I felt small, insignificant, as if my pain was too much to matter to anyone. Every sound felt amplified. The crunch of leaves under a runner's shoes, the bark of a dog chasing a ball, the faraway honk of a car horn. It all seemed to highlight the distance between me and the world. I wanted to curl up on that bench, disappear, melt into the cracks between the wooden slats. But somehow, even in my sadness, I felt exposed, like everyone could see right through me. I avoided eye contact, stared at the cracks in the pavement, at the veins of the leaves fluttering in the breeze, anything to avoid meeting someone who might ask, "Are you okay?" Because I wasn't. I wasn't okay at all. And yet, even in that quiet despair, I kept breathing. My chest ached, my throat felt raw from unshed words, and my heart threatened to shatter with every memory I couldn't escape. I was crying, trembling, lost, and the park didn't care. I felt invisible, alone. But somehow, just sitting there, amidst the rustling leaves and distant city hum, I felt the faintest trace of possibility, like maybe, just maybe, something unexpected could change everything. I remember how everything felt before it all fell apart, before the heartbreak that left me sitting on that cold park bench, feeling invisible to the world. I wasn't always this fragile. I had dreams, ambitions, and a heart that loved with reckless abandon. I believed in love in the way only someone who's never been burned can, wholeheartedly, completely, without hesitation. My days were full of purpose, work that challenged me, friends who made me laugh until my stomach hurt, and a life that felt vibrant and alive. I thought I had it all figured out, at least until I met him. He came into my life like a storm, intense and unexpected. At first, it was excitement, sparks, laughter, and moments I couldn't stop replaying in my head. He had a way of making me feel seen in a way no one else ever had. When he smiled, I felt like the world made sense. When he touched my hand, I believed in magic. I let myself fall, completely and willingly, thinking that what we had was rare, something that would last forever. I ignored the little signs at first, the fleeting looks, the vague excuses, the small moments of doubt. I told myself that love was supposed to be imperfect, that every relationship had bumps, and that we could survive anything together. But love can be fragile, more fragile than I ever imagined. The betrayal didn't happen all at once. It crept in, slow and deliberate, like a shadow stretching across a sunny day. First, it was a late text that didn't make sense, a sudden change in tone, a laugh that wasn't for me. Then came the lies, the half-truths, and finally, the realization that the person I trusted most had chosen someone else over me. The love I had believed would save me had turned into the source of my deepest pain. I felt my heart break in ways I didn't even know were possible, like it had been carved out and left bleeding on the floor. I tried to move on. I told myself I was strong, that I could rebuild, that I deserved better. But nights were the hardest. Lying awake in the dark, I replayed every memory, every moment I had given him, and questioned everything about myself. Was I not enough? Did I do something wrong? Why did he leave me feeling so small, so replaceable? Those questions haunted me, gnawing at my soul. I wanted closure, a reason, something to make sense of the chaos. But there was nothing, just emptiness and silence. And that emptiness followed me everywhere. Even when I smiled at work or chatted with friends, there was a hollowness inside me that no one could reach. I didn't just miss him. I missed the version of myself that had believed in love without fear. Sitting there on that bench in the park, I felt the weight of all those lost dreams pressing down. I was tired, heartbroken, and so achingly human. I didn't know it yet, but that day, in my sadness, my life was about to change in ways I could never have imagined. I didn't expect anyone to notice me that day. I was convinced that the world had moved on without me, that my heartbreak had made me invisible, like I was just another face in the crowd. And yet, out of nowhere, he appeared. He sat down on the bench beside me as if he had been waiting all along, and for a moment, I thought I must be imagining it. The quiet confidence in the way he settled next to me, the calm in his posture. It was unlike anyone I'd ever met. He didn't speak right away. For a few long seconds, we just shared the silence, the kind of silence that's heavy, almost tangible, filled with unsaid words and curiosity. I could feel the heat of my tears on my cheeks and the trembling of my hands pressed against my knees. I wanted to look away, to retreat further into myself, but there was something magnetic about him, something that quietly demanded attention. And then he said it. "I've been waiting." Those words stopped me in my tracks. I blinked, unsure if I had heard correctly, unsure if the world was playing a cruel joke. "Waiting? For me," I whispered, my voice small, fragile, betraying the mix of hope and disbelief swirling inside me. He nodded with a kind of certainty that unsettled me, and, at the same time, stirred something deep within my chest. I didn't know him, not really, and yet it felt like he had been a presence in my life for longer than I could understand. I wanted to scoff, to tell myself this was ridiculous, that billionaires didn't sit on park benches beside strangers and say cryptic things about waiting. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to move away. My heart was screaming for caution, but every fiber of me was alert, aware that something in the air had shifted. His voice was calm, steady, and it carried a warmth that felt almost impossible to describe. It wasn't arrogance, it wasn't the typical charm of someone wealthy. It was quiet, unassuming, and personal. I studied him, really looked for the first time. He wasn't flashy. He didn't carry the weight of the world in designer labels or ostentatious gestures. There was a gentleness to him, a patient presence that made the chaos in my own heart seem manageable, if only for a moment. I found myself asking questions silently. Who is he? Why here? Why me? My mind was racing, a mix of skepticism and longing. And yet, in that unexpected encounter, in that fragile moment of vulnerability, I realized I was listening, truly listening, to someone who might just see me. Not the sadness, not the brokenness, but me. I wanted to pull away, but my body stayed, rooted to the bench, drawn to the calm certainty he radiated. That one sentence, "I've been waiting," was enough to spark a flicker of hope inside me, a glimmer of something I had thought was lost forever. And in that moment, I understood that my life, the way I had known it, was about to shift in ways I could never have imagined. We sat there in silence for a moment longer, and I kept waiting for him to leave, to realize that I was just some stranger drowning in my own sorrow. But he didn't. Instead, he leaned slightly closer, just enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him, and asked softly, "Are you okay?" His voice wasn't intrusive. It was gentle, patient, like he was offering me permission to speak without forcing me to. I hesitated, unsure if I wanted to admit anything, unsure if I could trust this stranger with the cracks of my heart. For reasons I can't explain, I found myself telling him small pieces of my story. I didn't start with the big heartbreak or the betrayal, just the feeling of being lost, of wondering if anyone truly noticed me at all. And he listened. Not the kind of listening where someone is waiting to respond, but real listening, the kind that makes you feel seen. I was surprised at how natural it felt to open up, how the words poured out even when I hadn't planned to speak. He shared pieces of himself, too, not in a bragging way, not about wealth or status, but about life, about moments where he had been vulnerable, moments that shaped him. I found myself laughing quietly at his dry humor, even through my tears. There was an ease to the conversation, a rhythm that made the world outside the park fade into the background. I could almost forget the ache in my chest, almost forget that I had been sitting on that bench crying less than an hour ago. Somewhere between the hesitations and the quiet laughter, I realized I was curious about him, really curious. Who was this man who had the patience to sit with someone he barely knew? Why had he chosen to sit next to me, right here, in this moment of raw vulnerability? And as our conversation continued, I felt a strange shift inside me, a flicker of hope, of connection, of something I hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to relax just a little, to imagine that maybe, just maybe, someone could care. And as he smiled at me, just that small, knowing smile, I felt the smallest seed of possibility take root. Something unexpected was beginning, something that felt like it could change everything I thought I knew about heartbreak and about myself. As the minutes passed, our conversation drifted into quieter, more personal territory. I found myself sharing things I hadn't said aloud to anyone, the fears I carried, the moments that had broken me, the dreams I had once clutched so tightly but had now abandoned. And somehow, he didn't flinch or judge. He didn't offer empty reassurances or cliches about moving on. Instead, he listened, really listened, and responded with a kind of understanding that felt rare, almost sacred. I could feel my defenses slowly crumbling, brick by brick, as I realized that he wasn't just there to talk. He was there to truly see me. I noticed small details about him, the ones that don't matter on paper but speak volumes in person. The way his eyes softened when I spoke, the subtle tilt of his head when he was curious, the calm steadiness in his voice that seemed to hold space for all of my messy emotions. It was disarming, how effortlessly he made me feel safe, how natural it felt to laugh through tears, how the heaviness in my chest lightened with each passing minute. I found myself leaning in, wanting to hear more, wanting to share more, and even daring to hope a little. We talked about life, about choices, about moments that had shaped us. He didn't shy away from vulnerability, and that honesty made it easy for me to let my guard down. I shared my insecurities, the ways I had doubted myself, the lingering questions I had about love and trust, and he listened, nodding, offering insight without ever making me feel small or wrong. For the first time in a long while, I felt like someone truly understood me. Not the surface version of me, but the real, flawed, fragile me that I usually hid from the world. There were moments when our eyes met, long enough to feel something unspoken pass between us. I noticed the small gestures too, the way he didn't rush, how he gave me space while still staying close, how he made me feel like my story mattered. I realized that this connection wasn't about wealth or status. It wasn't about grand gestures or superficial charm. It was about presence, about attentiveness, about genuine care. And in that simple human way, something inside me began to shift. By the time I glanced at my watch, hours had passed like minutes. I didn't want the conversation to end. I didn't want the warmth, the understanding, the subtle spark of something more to vanish. And deep down, I knew that this unexpected encounter was more than a coincidence. It was the beginning of something that could change my life. For the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to imagine hope again, and it was intoxicating. I had known something about him felt different from the start, but I didn't expect the revelation that came next. As we talked, a subtle, almost casual honesty slipped out of him, the kind that made me stop mid-sentence and look at him in disbelief. He was a billionaire, not in the way people imagine, with arrogance or extravagance, but quietly, almost humbly, with the kind of confidence that comes from having built something extraordinary, and yet still choosing to stay grounded. My first thought was disbelief. How could someone so successful care enough to sit with me, a complete stranger, on a park bench? And yet, there he was, as real and present as the ache in my chest. For a moment, I froze. I wasn't sure what to say or how to react. My mind raced with questions I didn't even want to voice. Why me? Why here? How does someone like him end up sitting next to someone like me, right at the moment when I'm falling apart? I could feel my heartbeat quicken, a mix of awe, fear, and cautious excitement. And through it all, he stayed calm, unhurried, letting me process, letting me find my footing without pressure. There was no arrogance in his eyes, no hint that he expected gratitude or admiration. Instead, there was only patience, curiosity, and something that felt like genuine interest. I realized then that this was different. This wasn't one of those encounters where charm masks, emptiness, or wealth is used to manipulate. He wasn't here to impress me. He was here because he wanted to connect, to share a moment with someone he had somehow been waiting for, and somehow I was that person. The thought was overwhelming, almost too much to comprehend, and yet it sparked a light in me that I hadn't felt in months. Hope? Maybe life wasn't done with me yet. Maybe heartbreak wasn't the end, but the beginning of something unexpected. I found myself studying him, noticing the little things that made him real, the subtle laughter lines at the corners of his eyes, the quiet confidence in his gestures, the way he seemed to listen with his whole being. It wasn't the money, the success, or the status that made me pause. It was the way he made me feel seen in a way I hadn't been in a long time. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, I began to allow myself to imagine that this man, this billionaire who had chosen to sit beside me, might not just understand my pain, but also see the person I was beneath it. In that moment, I realized something important. Life had a way of surprising you, of showing up when you least expect it, of offering second chances in forms you could never have anticipated. And as I sat there, my heart still tender, but cautiously hopeful, I understood that this encounter wasn't just a coincidence. It was a turning point. Something had shifted, something had begun, and I knew deep down that my life was about to change in ways I couldn't yet imagine. As the conversation continued, I realized something had shifted inside me. The heaviness that had weighed on my chest all morning, the loneliness, the heartbreak, the sense that I was invisible, was beginning to lift just a little. It wasn't gone, not completely, but for the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time. Possibility. There was a warmth in his presence that made the world outside that park fade into the background, and I felt drawn to it, even as caution whispered in my mind. He didn't rush me. There was no pressure, no expectations, no grand gestures. He simply sat there, talking, listening, smiling at the small things I shared, and it was enough to make me wonder, could someone really care this much about a stranger? Could someone see me, the real me, and still want to be near me? I found myself leaning in slightly, letting my walls drop, letting the vulnerability I had guarded so fiercely spill out in tiny, honest fragments. I laughed when I wanted to, frowned when I needed to, and somehow it felt safe. Eventually, he asked if he could see me again, not in a rushed, impulsive way, but with patience, a quiet sincerity that made my heart ache in a way I didn't fully understand. I hesitated because the idea of opening myself up again felt terrifying, but there was something in his eyes, something calm and unwavering, that made me consider it. Maybe this was different. Maybe this wasn't the kind of heartbreak I had survived before. Maybe this was a second chance, not just at love, but at trusting someone again, at believing in the possibility of being seen and valued. We exchanged numbers, but even that simple act felt monumental. It was more than just digits on a phone. It was a bridge between my old, wounded self and the new possibility that life might still hold something unexpected for me. I left the park that day feeling a mix of disbelief and cautious hope. I had no idea where this would lead, whether it would last or fade, but I felt alive in a way I hadn't in months. The world seemed a little brighter, a little softer, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I could trust again. As I walked away from the bench, I carried with me the quiet realization that life doesn't always follow the script we expect. Heartbreak can feel endless, suffocating, and cruel. But sometimes, in the middle of despair, something miraculous can appear. Something or someone can show up when you least expect it and remind you that hope isn't gone, that love can be real, and that a new chapter might be waiting just around the corner. And as I glanced back at that empty bench, I felt the faintest, most fragile smile tug at my lips, because I knew somehow that this was only the beginning. As I walked away from the park that day, I couldn't stop replaying the moments in my mind. The way he had spoken to me, the quiet patience in his eyes, the understanding that felt so genuine. It all felt unreal, yet deeply grounding at the same time. I realized that in that brief encounter, something inside me had shifted. The walls I had built around my heart, brick by brick, over months of heartbreak, had begun to crack. And in those cracks, a little light was starting to seep through. I reflected on how much I had changed over the past months. The sleepless nights, the endless questions, the self-doubt that had followed me everywhere. And yet, for the first time in what felt like forever, I began to see my own strength. I had survived heartbreak, endured loneliness, and yet I was still here, still capable of feeling, still capable of hope. That realization, quiet and unassuming, brought with it a sense of empowerment I hadn't felt in a long time. I was learning that heartbreak didn't define me. It had shaped me, yes, but it hadn't broken me completely. In that moment, I also understood something about love, not the kind of love that dazzles and fades, but the kind that begins quietly, with patience, presence, and understanding. I realized that maybe I had been waiting too long for someone to notice me, to truly see me, and that sometimes life places the right person in your path at the exact moment you're ready to recognize them. It wasn't about him being wealthy, successful, or extraordinary in the ways the world measures. It was about the way he saw me, the way he held space for my emotions, and the way he allowed me to be exactly who I was, without pretense or apology. I felt a cautious hope stirring inside me, fragile but undeniable. It was a reminder that life could surprise you when you least expect it, that vulnerability could lead to connection, and that even in the aftermath of heartbreak, the possibility of joy and love still exists. For the first time in months, I let myself imagine a future that didn't feel hollow, a future that might include laughter, trust, and the kind of intimacy I had once feared I would never experience again. And as I reflected on that day, sitting alone on a park bench, I realized that maybe, just maybe, this unexpected encounter was the beginning of a new chapter, not just in my story, but in who I was becoming. Sitting here now, thinking back to that day on the park bench, I realize how much it changed me. I went there broken, feeling invisible, weighed down by heartbreak, convinced that no one could ever see me again. And yet, in that quiet, ordinary place, something extraordinary happened. Someone noticed me. Not for my past, not for my pain, but for me. Just me. That realization, small as it may seem, reminded me that life has a way of surprising you, even when you've given up hope. It's strange how the simplest moments can shift the course of your entire life. A single sentence, "I've been waiting," had the power to crack open a door I thought was sealed forever. That one encounter taught me that vulnerability isn't weakness, that allowing yourself to be seen can lead to connection, and that even after heartbreak, hope can find its way back to your heart. I walked away from that park bench different than I had arrived, lighter, more open, and ready to embrace the unexpected. If there's one thing I want you to take from my story, it's this. No matter how heavy your heart feels, no matter how invisible or small you think you are, life has a way of bringing people into your path at the exact right time. You never know when someone might notice you, understand you, or change your world in ways you couldn't have imagined. And sometimes that person shows up in the most ordinary place at the most unexpected moment. So if you've ever felt heartbroken, lost, or invisible, remember this story. Believe in the possibility of unexpected encounters, of second chances, of love that can arrive when you least expect it. And if this story touched you, if it made you feel seen even for a moment, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you never miss a story that might just remind you of hope, connection, and the magic of life's surprises. Because sometimes, all it takes is one moment, one person, one sentence, and your life can change forever. And for me, it all started on that park bench with him and the words that I'll never forget. "I've been waiting."